Hello! So, I just finished reading part 1 of Elantris called The Shadow of Elantris, which actually ended up being over half the book, rather than a third like one assumes when one sees that there's 3 parts to a book. But that's fine. Um, so, Overall impression so far, I'm really enjoying this. If this really is the worst book or one of the worst books in the Cosmere, then I'm really looking forward to the rest because I really love this so far. It's a really unique setting. I was not expecting something so, I guess, high concept fantasy so early on in the Cosmere. I expected something a bit more basic, but no, we're immediately dealing with like a city full of undead gods, essentially, which is really interesting. So yeah, uh, setting is really cool. Characters. Now, the book follows 3 main characters, sort of in alternating POV chapters, apart from one chapter, which randomly had 2 points of view in it, like switching back and forth, which was interesting and sort of weird after over 20 chapters of the exact same pattern, but it worked. Um, yeah, so the characters. Raoden is probably my least favorite. His story is the most interesting. He is dealing with the magic system and with Elantris and with the most fascinating elements of this setting. Um, and a lot of the secondary characters in his story, like Karata and Galadon, are very interesting. But he himself as a person just fails to hold my interest. Like, he's a bit too plain, a bit too goody two shoes, I guess. I don't feel like he really has any major character flaws, which makes him a bit uninteresting. And for a while there, things did sort of come too easily to him, like his conquest of Karata and Anden just sort of went too smoothly. Everything just sort of worked out perfectly, which felt a bit cheap. But things are getting more complicated for him now. Funnily enough, thanks to Serene, who accidentally fucked him over with her plans, thinking that she was helping the Elantrians. Um, so yeah, I'm more interested in his story now than I was at the start. I also don't really know what's going on with the whole lake thing. I don't know where that's going. I don't know what the. I don't really have any predictions about the Elantris part of the plot because I think that that's where most of the sort of surprises are going to come. Like, we still know very little about how Eondor works, and I don't really have any theories about what caused the fall of Elantris or whatever. So I'm not gonna even try to predict what's gonna happen with that whole storyline. Um, Serene is a better character, I think, than Raoden. She is more nuanced, more 3 dimensional. She has various flaws and idiosyncrasies in her personality. She's a bit of a hypocrite sometimes. She makes mistakes. She screws up. Her actions have sometimes bad consequences for herself or others. Um, and I also really like how overly ambitious she is. Like, she just walked into this kingdom and was like, okay, I'm gonna fix the gender relations of this kingdom. I'm gonna solve patriarchy single-handedly. I'm gonna fix the class system by making all the nobles treat their peasants well. I'm going to uh, fight a hostile religious takeover. I am going to overthrow the king and help him stay in power at the same time as 2 separate plots. Uh, and then I say it that way, it sounds like I'm saying that it's like a messy plot that doesn't make a lot of sense, but I don't actually think that. I think that Sanderson does a good job of crafting this character in such a way that all of this is kind of in character for her. Like, yeah, she's the kind of person who would do that. She is obsessed with having a cause to fight for. Like, as soon as she sees a cause, she just latches onto it, which makes her very charming, I think, and likable. So yeah, I do like Serene. Um, I also feel like she is, you know, the closest thing to a main character here. Like Raoden and Hrathen get equal screen time, but it kind of feels like this is Serene's story more than anything else, at least so far. Um, which I like. We don't get enough. We definitely don't get enough sort of mainstream adult uh, epic fantasy which centers female protagonists. So I'm happy to see that. I'll get back to the gender thing later on when I talk about some of my more political thoughts. And finally, Hrathen. I love Hrathen. Hrathen is definitely my favorite character so far. He is extremely complex and nuanced and three-dimensional and he just has a lot of depth to him. Like the there's so many things he's dealing with. Like he's wrestling with his faith. He has ethical concerns that one doesn't really expect from someone like him. When you first meet him, he seems like a religious fanatic, but then over time it becomes clear that he's actually the opposite of that. He's kind of almost an atheist, or at least an agnostic. And what at first seems like fanaticism is simply his logical conclusions drawn from the facts before him. He is undoubtedly an antagonist. I am not supporting his goals in any way, but I do understand them. I understand his actions. I understand his choices. And I also think that his conflict with Dilaf is a really interesting choice. Like the idea of sort of making a character, making a point of view character at first seem like he's going to be the big bad of the story, and then having it turn out that he's actually maybe gonna try to stop the more evil guy, I think. I have predictions about this. Or I don't really have a ton of predictions about where Serene's and Raoden's stories are going. I have a strong feeling that Raoden is, by the end of this book, going to sort of have to enter into some sort of alliance of convenience with Serene. To try and stop Dilaf's plans. When Dilaf sort of crosses the moral event horizon, which should happen soon, I think, at the rate he's going. So yeah, that's my prediction for Hrathen, and my second prediction has to do with the poison that he ordered and drank himself. I personally suspect that that poison is somehow maybe going to turn him into an Elantrian. Maybe not literally, like maybe he won't become immortal and unable to heal, but he might get like the aesthetic symptoms of being an Elantrian, like the gray skin and the splotches and the falling out hair. I don't know why he would do this. I don't know what his plan there would be, but that is the feeling I'm getting. And I'm curious about if I'm right. If I'm wrong, I don't know what the poison could be. Like, what could he possibly want to do to himself? Unless it has something to do with the monastery that he trained at, which is heavily implied to teach some kind of like fucked up dark blood magic or something. But yeah, other than that, I've really got no idea where this is going, which is exciting. I have no idea what the trajectory of this whole book is going to be like from this point forth. Okay, now as for some more political thoughts, I guess, the gender stuff in this book is interesting and I like it because, first of all, I think there's a sufficient diversity of female characters. Like, the female characters we get are different enough, their motives are different, their thoughts are different, their attitudes towards femininity and towards men are different enough that I don't feel like we have a Robert Jordan situation where it's kind of like implying that there are like these fundamental personality traits that all women share, which I often felt like Robert Jordan was doing in The Wheel of Time, even though he had a bunch of different female characters. Um, by the way, I'm going to be comparing Sanderson to Jordan a lot, probably. I don't think he would. I don't think Sanderson would argue against the idea that he is heavily inspired by Robert Jordan as a writer, so it's sort of inevitable that you're going to be comparing the two, I think. And I want to say I do love The Wheel of Time and Robert Jordan's writing, but I do think most of the comparisons I'm going to be making between the two authors are probably going to be in Sanderson's favor rather than Jordan's, because I do enjoy Sanderson's style more, at least based on the three Wheel of Time books he wrote. So what else? So yeah, I do like the gender politics of the book, as it were. Less thrilled about the class politics. Now, I don't need every book I read to be socialist propaganda, nor do I think it should be. Personally, I would probably enjoy them if they were, but obviously we need diversity of thought in fantasy as well as everywhere else. So I'm fine with this book not like being, you know, socialist propaganda. But I do think that it falls into a trap that a lot of fantasy falls into, which is to just uncritically accept the idea of the nobility and the feudal system. Like, there is criticism here, of course, of Iadon's particular version of that system. But so far, I don't really feel like there's any criticism of the idea of there even being nobles. Like the whole issue is presented as, oh, the nobles are treating the peasants poorly. We should get them to treat them better. Rather than, we should maybe not have nobles and peasants. Maybe we shouldn't define people in this way and give different legal rights to people of different classes. But, like I said, that's sort of a universal problem of fantasy. Jordan certainly also had it. Tons of like supposedly kind and good nobles and kings and monarchs in Wheel of Time. And here as well. So I don't it's not my personal cup of tea, but I'm not gonna say it's like an objectively bad thing for the book to be that way. Where I am going to criticize the book in a more like direct way is the portrayal of Keen's autistic son. I feel like there's a lot of stereotypical portrayals of people with autism sort of wrapped up in this character. He's only appeared in like 1 or 2 chapters so far, so it could get better later on. But it is a bit unfortunate. It feels like he has really only one character trait, and that character trait is that he is the autistic one. So hopefully that gets better. If not in this book, then at least in future Cosmere books, because I do know that Brandon Sanderson is kind of known for writing a lot of neurodivergent characters, a lot of them as protagonists. So I'm hoping that future portrayals of neurodivergence are going to be more nuanced, more three-dimensional, and less like caricatures. That being said, it's far from the worst it could be. Like, it's a very sympathetic caricature. Like, the character is likable. He's not presented in a negative light. He just isn't really presented as a particularly complex character beyond the fact that he's autistic. It's like that's his only personality trait. Which might also be like an unfortunate side effect of how minor of a character he is. So we'll see how that goes in the future. Maybe he'll get a bigger part in the second half of the book. So yeah, really those are my only real criticisms of the book so far. I did think I was going to have a problem with some of the gender politics when Karata was introduced, because I was like, really, Brandon? Like, you have 3 evil gang leaders and only one of them is female, and it turns out the female one is the one who is motivated by, like, maternal instinct and love for children. But I'm happy to say that that was a premature judgment on my part. Karada is both a more interesting character than that, and also one of the other 2 gang leaders, Sheor, turned out to be female as well. And not motivated by maternal instincts at all. And also there's a bunch of fairly diverse women outside of Elantris as well. So I'm happy that that particular criticism of mine turned out to be premature. And for all I know, my problems with the class thing and the autistic thing might also end up being premature by the time I finish this book. I'd certainly like them to be, so here's hoping. Anyway, I think that's about all the thoughts I have about this first third of the book. When I finish a book, I'm probably gonna sort of go more in depth with my thoughts on the overall themes and stuff. But so far, I think this is enough for the first diary entry, as it were. See you guys next time.